So what's the alternative here? How can we ensure that our information isn't being abused?
So what we do know about RICA is that its use has, there isn't very good information or transparency in the system, but we do know that RICA usage has increased by about it's more than doubled, or perhaps it's nearly tripled, in fact, over 3 years.
When you say RICA usage, you mean the number of people who
Yeah, excuse me. I should say that we know that the amount of surveillance through RICA has almost tripled in the last in the last 3 years, between 2008 and 2011, in the last 2 years under reportage. And so that's really significant.
How do we know this?
Parliament is meant to release some basic statistics about how RICA is being used. They get the information from the Department of Justice, and then it comes to us, but it's usually only 2 or 3 years down the line. And there was a big blockage of that information, and finally this year it was released all in one go. And so using that, we've determined that it increased by about 170% in those 3 years. For reasons that aren't entirely clear, because as I said, we don't know how often it's been used in criminal investigations, so there needs to be more transparency. But your question was about how we fix the system. I think that in the last year, because of all these revelations from Edward Snowden about how globally communications is become incredibly insecure, and how globally people's private communications is really being sucked up by some shadowy person somewhere. This has led to massive developments in global communications policies, where governments are pushing back against their own surveillance policies. That's happening in the US, for instance, and where a new international practice is being developed about how we can, understanding that surveillance is sometimes necessary, how we can protect users' privacy. And in South Africa, that, as I say, that isn't happening. The first thing is that there needs to be better transparency in the system. We need to have much clearer information about how this communications data is being used, how surveillance is being used, and how the oversight mechanisms are working. And that information isn't good right now, and it's not clear. The second thing is that RICA needs to be amended in certain ways with privacy concerns in mind. And for instance, if you are under surveillance, you don't have the right of being told. There's no user notification saying, oh, last year you were under surveillance, we thought that you were smuggling drugs, but it turns out that we've got nothing on you, but just to know that someone was going through all your personal calls, your husband or your girlfriends or whatever. So that user notification isn't happening. So people don't know when their rights are being violated, even in times where that rights violation wasn't warranted for law enforcement purposes. And there's also the question of whether or not you should be surveilled. Remember that under RICA, it's legally required for the communications companies to provide your data. There's no, they are legally required to provide that data when asked for it, but they're legally forbidden from telling you when it's happening. So as I said, it's a very, very forceful system, and I think in the context of a global debate, it's gone too far, and we need to push back against it.